welcome to another session on Indian writing in English. We'll continue with Nagamandala. We stopped with the prologue. We didn't complete the prologue. We stopped with the flames and the story and the song coming to the temple. So let's continue with where we stopped. But before that, let us have a critical analysis of the flames, a little more about the flames and folk tales as such. See, this is also a part of children's literature. It also can be considered a part of children's literature. Now, why does it become a part of children's literature, a serious one? Well, I'll tell you as we move on with the play. So, it is considered children's literature because, as Girish Karnad himself says, that he has been influenced by A.K. Ramanujan's stories, two of the folk tales from Karnataka which was told to him by A.K. Ramanujan. And these folk tales were often told or recited, either the song or in the form of song or story, were often told to the little children while feeding them or putting them to sleep. And the other members, the audience, also consists of elder or older women. So it's all to do with women folk and their space. So what do these stories, as we move on with the play, we will understand. We'll also understand that though these folk tales are stories told to the children, it is not to be taken lightly. It has a kind of essentialism in it. It is a kind of, a construct of universal truth. Again, I would use the word construct. Construct of universal truths. So are these truths universal? What are these universal truths, first of all? The sun rises in the east, it sets in the west. Do the sun actually rise in the east and set in the west? Is it like that? So what are they? What is that? That is actually a construct for our easier understanding of day and night, for the easier understanding of the pattern of the earth's rotation, right? So it's a construct. Again, it is a construct, but it is called universal truth. So likewise, these stories that are told to the children are also universal truths, again a social construct, which has been handed down from one generation to the other generation. Here, the domain or the realm of women as such. So I want you to think about it. I'm not going to tell you anything. I want you to think about it, do a little bit of research and think about its effect and things. You have already studied criticism, you have studied Marxism, you have studied various critical theories as well. So I want you to see how it gets reflected in these plays. Okay, so without much ado, let's move on to the critical analysis of where up to where we stopped. I did not do the critical analysis of the flames, the hierarchy. That is. So let's just quickly do that and then we will move on to the play. So the flames as such, what do they symbolize? I told you it is all about women. It is a domain of women. And these flames represent women. It could be servant class, it could be older women sitting together. They sit together after once the children have retired to bed to gossip. It could be, the traditional form of narrating old stories, which actually is lost now. So it might seem to be a very surprising thing to you, because we don't have it nowadays. Everybody is glued to the TV, in front of the serial, yeah, those soap operas which make you cry unnecessarily. So nowadays we don't get to hear those old grandmother tales. Earlier it was not like that. Earlier, when these televisions and all were not, were something that was totally new, or were not even thought of, or were not even invented. At that time, people used to engage in storytelling, and that is how the oral tales were or took form. So here you have women folk sitting around, either they would gossip, they would tell tales about other houses and households, or they would sit to tell tales about or stories which perhaps is based on various myths of Indian theatre, various legends, various folk tales. Okay, so it's a merge of all these things. And not just that, these flames also tell you through their stories, through their characteristics. Like, see, some are made of kuspi oil, some out of castor oil, some kerosene oil, some coconut oil. So what do they symbolize or indicate? So when Karnad writes kuspi oil, castor oil, kerosene oil, he has one more intention. It's not just the characteristic of the flame, but also he's trying to tell you the social hierarchy, the inherent social system of our Indian society. Okay, the social hierarchy. All right. So that's with the critical analysis of the where we stopped. I also want to tell you about the nature of the folk tale. Folk tales, especially oral folk tales, are handed down from one generation to the other. So as we move on, we understand from the story that in order to keep an oral tradition alive, it has to be passed down to the next generation. Otherwise, what happens is the story dies. If it is not passed on, it dies with that particular person. Whoever that person is, it dies with him or her, if it is not passed on to the next generation or passed on to another person. So a folk tale or an oral folk tale can continue, can exist only in this manner. Okay, so that's one important thing that I wanted to tell you. And another thing that I wanted to tell you before we begin, we move on to the another plot, another story woven with this story. The story would start to relate in a Rani's story very soon. So the character is Rani. She's the queen. It could be any woman, any Indian woman who is subjugated under the patriarchal, evil patriarchal society. She's also the kind of woman who is loved and cared by her parents. So in her house, it represents any woman. Almost all of us, you and me and all women as such. In our house, we are Rani, we are the Lakshmi, we are the goddess. But when we get married to another house, when we are married off, we lose our importance. Our Rani just becomes a maid. So the Indian society, the hypocrisy where women are considered as goddess or Lakshmi of the house, is actually given the status of a maid, a housemaid, and is tortured and agonized. Okay, and you have Appanna. Appanna means any man. So when this Appanna, by Appanna it means it could be any man who is male chauvinistic, who consider women his or his wife his personal property and has the right to do anything, torture her, kill her. He's the owner of that particular property. He considers his wife as an object, a property of his own. So that's Aparna. It could be any Indian man. It needn't be any Indian man as such. It could be any man, any person who is male chauvinistic. Then you have Kurdava. Kurdava literally, it could be Kurdava as such means the blind one. This Kurdava could mean could have both the literal as well as metaphorical meaning. So this woman Kurdava is born blind, and therefore her life as such is heaped in darkness. She's superstitious. That's the metaphorical meaning. She's blindly, or she believes in superstition, and her blind faith has a lot to do with her beliefs in magical potions and things. And literally she is blind, and Kappanna means the dark one. So as we move on, you will understand why he is called the dark one. He's actually a fair boy, and he was born fair, and his father wanted to name him the fair one, but Kurdava being blind, being born blind, she knew nothing but darkness, and therefore she decides to name him Kappanna, which means dark one. Okay, and then you have the elders, 3 elders. It could mean any people, anyone. The 3 elders, the society, the government. Okay, so it has that kind of symbolic effect there, who again are prejudiced, they are biased. Then you have the mass, the crowd, who have absolutely no individuality as such. They believe anything and everything, and they change their views accordingly. Then you have the Naga, the cobra. So if you look at all these names, the character list, then man, story, Rani, Aparna, Kurdava, Kappanna, elders, all these, they are not given any particular names. Rani means queen. So if you look at the meaning, it all has to do with the common noun, not a proper noun. So they are stereotypes, they are allegorical in nature. So I want you to bear this in mind. Okay, so let's begin the rest of it. So much for the talk. Yes, so we stopped with the sari coming to the temple. The story, in the form of a woman dressed in a new colorful sari, enters and acknowledges the enthusiastic welcome from the flames with a languid wave of the hand, and goes and sits in a corner, looking most despondent. The flames gather around her. New flame. Come on, why are you so despondent? We are here and are free the whole night. We'll listen to you. Story. Thank you, my dears. It is kind of you. But what is the point of your listening to a story? You can't pass it on. Flames. That's true. What can we do? Wish we could help. So while the flames make sympathetic noises, the man jumps out from behind the pillar and grabs the story by her wrist. Man. I'll listen to you. The flames flee helter-skelter in terror. The story struggles to free herself. Story. Who are you? Let me go. Man. What does it matter who I am? I'll listen to you. Isn't that enough? I promise I'll listen all night. The story stops struggling. There is a new interest in her voice. Story. You will? Man. Yes. Story. Good. Then let me go. But the narrator, he doesn't let her go. And the story says, I need my hands to act out the parts. And therefore he lets her go. The man, he let go of her hand. And the story says, there is a condition, however. Man, what? Story, you can't just listen to the story and leave it at that. You must tell it again to someone else. Man, that I certainly shall, if I live. But first I must be alive too. That reminds me, I have a condition too. Story. Yes. Man, I must not doze off during the tale. If I do, I die. All your telling will be wasted. Story. As a self-respecting story, that is the least I can promise. Man. All right then, start. But suddenly he realizes something. But no, it's not possible. I take back my word. I can't repeat the story. Story. And why not? Man, I have just taken a vow not to have anything to do with themes, plots, or acting. If I live, I don't want to risk any more curses from the audience. So he remembers what he or the vow he took in front of that deity, the ruined or the destroyed idol. The story gets up. Goodbye then. We must be going. Man, wait, don't go, please. Then he thinks, I suppose I have no choice. Then he turns to the audience. Obviously, the audience. So again, thus, see, this brings in the alienation effect. So the narrator, Karnad, by making the Sutradhara or the Sutradhar to address the audience, tend to tell you that what you're watching is just a play. And don't be too subjective. You should look at the play with an objective view. Okay, so he's trying to bring in that alienation effect, which we already talked of in the earlier videos. So he turns to the audience. So now you know why this play is being done. I have no choice. Bear with me, please. As you can see, it is a matter of life and death for me. He calls out, musicians, please. So again, you have see that Indian theatre where you have the musicians and all in front of you, where it's not in the background, it's not the background music that you hear, but rather you find the musicians and all in front of you. Like you see Kathakali, in Kathakali and all, you will find the musicians and the ones on the stage itself. Okay, so that's the Indian theatre or the traditional theatre. So musicians, they enter and they occupy their mat, and then he calls out to the story and the song. So the story and the song also comes in, and throughout the rest of the play, the man and the story remain on stage. The flames too listen attentively, though from a distance. So the flames are all gathered at a distance, and on the stage you have the man and the story. And to the story, he says, go on, tell the tale. So we'll stop with this because that's the end of the prologue, and then we will begin the act 1. So let's have a critical discussion. So you have the story. She comes in and she sits gloomily in a corner, and all the flames try to cheer her up, and They assure her that they are ready to listen to her story. But story tells them the paradoxical. That's where Girish Karnad brings in the paradoxical nature of the story, the oral story. So story tells them that there is no use in listening to her story, as the flames, they cannot pass it on. So the flames, they make sympathetic noises. So there is this flames, you have to see them in both literal as well as metaphorical aspect. In the literal aspect, it is a magical element where you have they are personified and they are given lifelike features. And through this, Karnad also tries to tell you that oral traditions can live only if they are passed on to the next generation. So in the meanwhile, the fallen playwright, he jumps in and grabs the rest of the story, and he offers to listen to her story. But there is a condition. She tells him that unless and until he passes this story on to somebody, she's not going to tell him this story. So he, without thinking, he suddenly says, yeah, I'm ready to accept it. There's no harm. I will accept your condition. I'm ready to accept your condition. And all I want is, he also has a condition. He tells her that, see, you must agree that you will not let me doze off to sleep. I should keep awake. If I doze off to sleep, then I will die. So I want you to tell me an interesting story that will not make me doze off to sleep. And the story being she knowing herself, and she knowing the worth of her story. She's a self-respecting. That's why it's called self-respecting. Self-respecting means one who knows one's worth. Okay, so story, she assures him that you don't have to worry about that. My story is indeed interesting, and you won't doze off to sleep. And she's about to tell him the story, and suddenly man is reminded of what the vow that he took in the temple, or when he came initially. There was a vow that he took in front of that broken idol, that he would, if he lives, he will give up story writing forever. And then he tells her, sorry, I cannot. I have already taken a firm vow here in this, in front of this broken idol. So here again there is a metaphorical touch. There is a symbol. It's a symbol. So when he takes a vow or promise, he takes it in front of an absent god. See, the deity here is beyond recognition. It is almost broken, and it is beyond recognition. And therefore, you can say that it is an absent God, and therefore his vows that he has taken, the vow that he has taken, or the promise that he has made, is not significant. It's not important. It does not set itself into motion, and that itself, though it was very hilarious and humorous, it is a symbol. Okay, so a story says that if that is the case, I'm not going to tell you the story. I'm just going to leave. And she's about to leave when he suddenly stops and says, stop, don't. And then he turns to the audience, and he tells the audience that you have to listen to to my story. It's a matter of life and death. And he summons the musicians and the story and the song to proceed. So throughout the rest of the play, the fallen playwright and the story remain on the stage, and the flames too listen attentively the story and the song from a safe distance. Now, it also, don't you think it reminds us of Coleridge's poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner? that relates the experiences of a mariner who has returned from a long sea voyage, and the mariner stops a man who is on the way to a wedding ceremony and begins to narrate a story. So in this context, the storyteller is like the ancient mariner who grabs the wedding guest and forces him to listen to his story, and the listener of the story is just like the wedding guest who is forced to listen to the account of the ancient mariner. So the story of the ancient mariner stresses upon the significance of passing on the story form from one to another without imprisoning it in one's mind, as the old woman did in the in our Nagamandala itself, where she suppresses the story. Okay, so that brings into mind the reference to Coleridge's poem. So, if you look at this, the prologue creates a proper supernatural atmosphere required for the play Nagamandala. The scene is appropriately laid in the sacred chamber of a ruined temple at night. The image of the deity is badly damaged, and it makes it impossible for us to know the presiding deity to which the temple is dedicated. So to this temple arrives a broken playwright. Again, he is also shattered and broken. Yes, a disgraced playwright who has invoked the curse of death for making his audiences go to sleep with his unbearable, terrible plays. And another thing that I want you to bear in mind is the mendicant. Now, who's a mendicant? Mendicant is a sage, a beggar-like person, but he is not a beggar, rather he is a saintly person. There is a saintly aura around him, and he is a kind of sadhu, okay, but he is not a beggar either. So he tells him that he has been cursed, the playwright has been cursed, and the only way to escape this curse is to keep himself awake for one full night that month. He does not want, the playwright does not want to die a shameful death at home as a cursed writer. For he has, lied to his family that he was a popular playwright whose plays are staged in packed houses. So once they find the hard truth of it, they're going to be heartbroken, and he doesn't want that to happen. So he has come to the temple to die unhonored and unsung. Okay, so the inglorious playwright is there in the temple, and he is surprised to find these naked flames with female voices floating in the air, having their nocturnal meetings there at the temple. And these nocturnal the naked flames and their nocturnal deliberations at the ruined temple add to the supernatural and magical elements of the play. Their stories are all about their household, and it reveals their feminine pride, it reveals jealousies and their sexualities. Some of the stories are very erotic, about that comments on the man-woman relationship, and the flames also serve as a chorus commenting on the foibles of human beings. Each one of them narrates a story about her household, and they share their stories with one another. This underlies the oral tradition of the stories. Each story told by each flame is quite different from the other. This underscores the variety and range of the stories. So, the unsuccessful playwright is on the verge of death, and he resorts to listening to the story, and as a result, another story is born. That is, the Nagamandala is born. So this playwright, he has been cursed, because he has written horrible plays, and now he's there in the village, in this village temple, and he meets the story. I mean, the story in capital letter, the story, the personified story, who comes with a story and has to pass on the story to somebody, and this is passed on to whom? To the playwright, and as a result, what is born? Another story is born, that is Nagamandala is born. Okay, so Girish Karnad creates humor at the expense of the playwright, who sends his audience to sleep by making them watch his plays. Instead of making them come to the edge of their seats by his plays, he sends them to sleep on their chairs. So the abused mass of sleep of his audience returns to plague him with the curse of death. Okay, well, Karnad also stresses on the importance of a playwright to provide top-class entertainment to his audience. So that's one important thing that Karnad tells, apart from the humor. The success of any play or playwright depends upon the excellence of the play or the playwright, obviously, and also the relationship between the playwright and the audience is like that of a husband and wife, and it should be harmonious so that it could be creative. Now, the flames who free themselves from their household lamps and who are there for the nocturnal meeting at the ruined temple are highly symbolic. They stand for, as I told you, jealousies, female foibles, pride, eroticism. Their stories are very interesting. And also, you have the comments on the paradoxical nature of oral tales in general. They have their existence of their own. They exist on their own. But what is the paradox? They are independent of the teller. They have an existence of their own and they are independent of the teller. But what is the paradox? They live only when they are passed on from the possessor of the tale to the listener. Right? So that is the paradoxical element. Similarly, the status of a tale is like that of a daughter. Traditionally, a daughter too is meant to be kept at home, but not for a long time. Similarly, the status of a tale becomes akin to that of a daughter, for traditionally a daughter too is not meant to be kept at home too long, but she has to be passed on. This identity adds a very important and ironic undertones to the relationship of the teller to the tales. The identification of the flames with young, sprightly, vocal women and their stories that they tell each other is a brilliant device used by Karnad for creating, a particular female context or a domain in the man-oriented folktale. Karnad brings within the play the strong association between oral narrative tradition and women's subculture existing within the patriarchal societies. Women tell many of these folk tales, myths and legends in their in the free time, especially at night. And in their telling, they often reinvent and transform them. So these stories represent, according to Karnad, a distinctively woman's understanding of the realities around her, a lived counterpoint to the patriarchal structures of classical texts and institutions. The female experience expressed in female narratives is woven within the folktale as a story, a young woman incorporating song as a colorful sari, and she tells her story to the professional male playwright. Okay. And like the flames, the story and the song too are personifications. The arrival of the story with the song to the temple provides necessary impetus for the birth of the play Nagamandala, besides saving this cursed playwright from death which hangs over his head like the sword of Damocles. So the play Nagamandala is therefore set in motion. Okay, so that's with the critical analysis of prologue. So with this we will stop and we will begin Act 1 in the next video. So till then, thank you and keep safe.